Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. On this show, I'm joined by Tanya Floaker, game designer and writer, to talk once again about RPGs, their journey through Moorcock and other fiction, how they found their way to game design, and just what they would do with a Moorcock-focused game. This is our 9th RPG-focused episode, and no doubt there'll be more in the future, but Tanya's take and approach to games are some of the most unique and tantalising I've come across. Also, we have a new spot to round things off today, as a friend of the show and long-standing patron Randall Gatlin calls in to talk about all of this Moorcock malarkey and reveal what may possibly be the coolest interaction with Mike and Linda I've yet heard about. I'll be hopefully doing a bit more of this, as we've had some people supporting us for a long time now, and I want to hear their voices and experiences, so more to come, I hope. But for now, take your place at the table, down at the Terminal Cafe, and join us as we examine our hands in the game of chance. Well, we're back in Derry and Tom's, and I'm delighted to have with me Tanya Floaker. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Very glad to be on.
Well, we go back a wee bit, don't we? Because going back to the old, those wonderful rose-tinted days of old Twitter. we had a few encounters on Twitter, and you invited me and Loz to join a game that you were running, which was a really terrific experience because it was very heavily narrative driven, which, just for everybody's benefit, we're going to be talking a lot about games and RPGs. And fortunately, we have a big overlap. When it comes to the Venn diagram of listeners for this podcast, there's a huge chunk in the middle who are RPG savvy. But, I mean, introduce yourself anyway.
Yeah, so I'm Tanya Floaker. When I'm not sort of doing my day job, I'm a game designer. I make tabletop roleplay games. Lots of smaller things, zine-sized stuff, lots of different subject matter. I swing between, a bit like Moorcock, I swing between genre quite heavily. So I've done everything from sort of quite grim, dark, like over-the-top, tragic end-of-the-world stuff, through to sort of surrealist sci-fi, through to kitchen sink drama. And I think the thing that puts it all in the same context beyond just being me behind it is I like the idea of looking at the sort of human connection that goes in these things and sort of thinking about the world.
The last thing I picked up of yours was Solstice.
Oh,
I think that was a Kickstarter, wasn't it? I think I backed the Kickstarter, which I absolutely love. But let's just whenever we have somebody new on the podcast who's not been on before, either a new guest or a new co-host, I always ask the question: what was your introduction? What was your background when it comes to things like genre fiction and Moorcock and gaming?
So I'd been heavily into like very hard sci-fi in my sort of like pre-teens into my teens. So you're talking Asimov and Clarke, that kind of really sort of like that era of classic science fiction. And then as I was sort of heading into my teens, I had a sort of weekly roleplay game going on. I'd been introduced to roleplay gaming through the medium of fighting fantasy solo novels.
As many of us did, yeah.
Yeah, and so I have a huge love of those. And my first roleplay game was playing advanced fighting fantasy with my cousin in my granny's bedroom on one of the sort of school holidays, and I was just hooked. And it took. There were lots of sort of attempts to try, and I got hold of a copy of Dungeoneer, the sort of advanced fighting fantasy rules, and there were different attempts over the years to get that running. But by the time I got to high school, I was thoroughly into both, sort of like heavy into the science fiction and fantasy classics, and also heavily into sort of like the role-play gaming of the time and wargaming as well. Lots of board games, war games, that sort of stuff. And so somewhere in my mid-teens, I must have been about 14, 15, I'd actually invited someone from the local game shop to play in my local, like my home game, my home roleplay game, and this older guy called Dave, really lovely. We'd war game in the shop together, and then I sort of invited him round for a cuppa. He got to meet my dad, so my dad could see, it's not just some rando who's a bit dodge. It's like someone who's sound. And because Dave was in his 60s, okay, and we're just chatting away after a game one time, and he sort of he turned me on to a lot of the new wave authors. He would just lend me books, and he lent me the first one he loaned to me was Elric of Melnirbunny, and boom, it was the perfect recommendation. And so that was the beginning of my love of Moorcock's work, which carries on to this day, but also opened the door on like Ursula Le Guin, opened the door on Roger Zelazny, opened the door on a lot of other stuff from there. So I was, it just carried on, and here we are.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? We all have those avenues into not just games but books, and the kind of the happenstance that occurs that leads you down certain directions. I've talked to people on this podcast whose teacher had a Rodney Matthews painting and poster on the wall, and they were like, "What's that?" And that was they tumbled down the rabbit hole. But yeah, I think having that one older person who gives you the avenue into these things is so crucially important, isn't it? And it's a wonderful thing because, of course, for me, in my particular case, it was Pops largely, my granddad. My mum, primarily because she read The Hobbit to us when we were kids, and that's when I became a fantasy fan. But also, I had a teacher when I was at school. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the podcast, but I had a teacher when I was at school, and I went on holiday to Spain with my mum and dad, and we stayed in a resort called Palamos. And my sisters didn't come because they'd got to the age now where they didn't want to go on holiday with the family. I think I was probably 13 at this point, so I was already reading things like, Moorcock and Sven Hassel and all the other things that I'd got off Pops. And we walked into the bar in our hotel/apartment block, and I spotted. Oh no, actually no. It was a little bit later. There was a bar on the street called the Frankfurter König in this resort, and I saw this guy sitting at the bar, skinny guy, round glasses, beard. I suppose at the time he'll have been in his late 30s, and it was my old English teacher from junior school, Mr. Simmons. Oh, wow. Yeah, a guy called Neil Simmons, and I spent the second week of my holiday, number one, getting pissed with him. And number two, I'd read all my Target Doctor Who books by the end of week one. So bumping into him, he lent me about 8 or 9 P.G. Wodehouse books. Oh. And that informed my obsession with and love of P.G. Wodehouse for about another 3 or 4 years. And it was all complete accident, It's just happenstance. And it's a wonderful, wonderful, exciting thing when you get led down one of those rabbit holes, isn't it?
Yeah. If it wasn't for like a short-lived local game shop in Perth in Scotland opening up the Hanging Troll, I'd not have met Dave. I'd not have got into. I might not have came across the new wave for a lot longer. It just all of those things clicked off a very short space of time, and have carried on throughout my life.
Even the hook into gaming that you described, with finding Dungeoneer and playing fighting fantasy books. I'm like most of us. I experienced fighting fantasy books in the 1980s, the Lone Wolf books, the Gary Chalk and Joe Diva ones as well. I can still remember going to bed and having nightmares about, was it the Hellgast? Or whatever it was, the Gary Chalk picture of the Hellgast in the first Lone Wolf book. It might not have been a Hellgast. I can't remember what it was, but it was a particularly frightening image for a 12 or 13-year-old. But it's also influential. But for some reason, I entirely missed out the advanced fighting fantasy game. I missed Maelstrom, completely passed me by. I think Puffin published Tunnels and Trolls at the time, and you could get that in Woolworths. For whatever reason, all of those completely passed me by, and we ended up going down the MERP and D&D route initially. Yeah. Do you think having that hook into advanced fighting fantasy has made a difference to how you've processed and thought about game design all these years later?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the way in which the sort of Dungeoneer, Black Sands, that sort of stretch of advanced fighting fantasy propositioned, it sort of has some interesting ways of sort of it talks about the creation of your story in very cinematic terms. Okay, so that was my first intro. It's talking about, doesn't talk about a dungeon master or an oppositional relationship. It talks about, like, you're a director and you're trying to help set the scene and put in nice sort of characterization and flavor things. And it talks about the player characters almost as if the main characters in a heroic story, and you want that heroic story to either go well or end in tragedy, but it's got to be a great story. It's got to be fun. And so I think that did shape a lot of where I went, because my first 3 roleplay game experiences were, first one was Advanced Fighting Fantasy, and then obviously I'm in Britain. I went from that to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and then from that, it was only after trying those two quite a lot. And Warhammer Fantasy's got this sort of it's got the comedy, it's got this grim comedy to it. It's got little tongue-in-cheek references all through it. It's got like little jabs in the art between different authors, different artists, little bits of sort of flavor that you can enjoy on so many levels. And then I hit AD&D, and it kind of bounced off me and some of the people I was playing with, because it didn't feel like it had. I just remember I was probably being a bit of a teenage jerk about it. I just remember I remember just seeing owlbears and just saying, what is going on here? Owlbears. Yeah. Like, I was just like, this is at the same time I'm reading lots of Pulp Fiction. Yeah. And so I'm accepting it from one avenue. But then in this game, I was just like, this game is a bit too, I said, this is too, it felt too war gamey, but not in the right ways.
Yeah.
And then at the time, I'm a little bit younger. This is sort of 90s. So I went from AD&D, an older copy that was from a charity shop that a friend had picked up, and we played. And so we started playing through that. And then we went through that, and then it went into that whole 90s trad game boom. So like, your Vampire the Masquerades and the Nominees, but also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. And there was so many games at the time that I got to try out and play. It's a very formative experience. You didn't just stick with one game. You got to try lots of different games and get different ideas. And that's really stuck with me over the years of this sort of like, there's lots of different experiences. The games all have a different flavor. They're all aiming to do something a bit different. It isn't just the set dressing. It's the style and the substance.
I think what after all these years, I think what I could probably take away from, because I've never played the Advanced Fighting Fantasy game, but I've played things like Troika, which I think are like the children of Advanced Fighting Fantasy in many ways, aren't they?
Yeah. I like to think of Troika. I played it once and I just said, this is freaky fighting fantasy.
Yeah.
Great.
It's really fun, and all of the supplements for it and all the scenarios for it are all really, really. The funny thing is, a lot of those things like Pretty Paleozoic Pals or whatever it's called, and Acid Death Fantasy and all of those supplements, many of those are more Moorcockian than the games that claim to be Moorcockian or Moorcock IP or Moorcock inspired, because they're psychedelic, they're weird, they're off the wall, and I love all that stuff. But I think the thing about me with AD&D is it was my gateway game after fighting fantasy books, because the people I knew played AD&D. But I very quickly moved on from it. I tried MERP, far too complicated, couldn't be arsed with tables and all that business, too complicated. So that led me down a path of discovering and trying to learn some of the most obtuse game systems, because I thought that's what gaming was. So Traveller 2300.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was rebadged as 2300 AD. I got my head around that and ran and played that. And what was the other one? Oh, first edition Twilight 2000.
Oof.
Holy
Yeah.
shit.
Yep.
I even got the second edition Twilight 2000 from eBay a few years ago because I got rid of all my stuff years ago. I ran that for nearly 2 years. And I picked it when I was in my early 20s, and I picked it up and I started reading it, and I started reading through the rules. I was like, how the fuck did I ever, number one, bother to learn these rules, and number two, run them? Because it's overwhelmingly weird and obtuse.
Yeah.
So this move towards more rules-light games came to me far too late in life. I wasted so many hundreds of hours fighting systems and all that business. So yeah, I really love that Advanced Fighting Fantasy existed and created all these things. Although I would say, even though I would never in a million years use an owlbear in a game, in many ways, it's a really Moorcockian monster.
Yeah.
Because roll on 2 random monster tables and throw them together, you know?
100%. This is why I kind of look back on it and think, what was I thinking? Like, and the same as yourself, some of these systems that I was picking up were just they're so complex. I look back at them now and I'm just like, how did we just why did we do this? I kind of feel like at the time as a bit younger, time worked a little differently, and
yeah, absolutely. And I think also, now I'm well into my 50s. My brain doesn't pick up anything as fast as it did when I was 18. So I'd probably pick these things up and store them and process them a lot easier 40 odd years ago. So how did you first get into game design work then? What was your gateway to that?
Well, it's a bit muddy, a bit liminal, because like as soon as I was sort of like aware of like anything beyond just family games, I was kind of making up my own games now and again anyway. I remember making up a war game with like toy soldiers, and I remember making up sort of role-play game scenarios. I hacked Advanced Fighting Fantasy to be for Warhammer 40,000 and ran that at my high school, and that was when I was maybe in first or second year of high school, and so I've always had that sort of, it always seemed just part of what people playing games were doing anyway.
Yeah.
Like, if you were running a game, you were probably hacking it as it went because it was so clunky and you had to kind of make things up on the fly. And sometimes you felt like the table, like it came together that something had to happen a certain way. And also in wargaming, there were so many war games at the time where the rules weren't designed to be airtight, competitive play models. They were sort of like, there's a little bit of give and take, and sometimes you just roll a d6 to see what way something goes, and you're a bit more fast and loose, and you talk more about the narrative flow of things. So there's that part of it. And then I'd be making fanzines, so I'm a big fan of the setting of Slay Industries, which was made in Scotland and sort of had a lot of local
the Nightfall
connections.
Games thing, yeah.
Yeah. So it had a huge history of having fanzines made for it with lots of fan content over the years and what have you. And there was this sort of the start of this sort of Zine Quest promotion by Kickstarter. I got this email from Kickstarter one day saying, have you got an idea that you've always wanted to put out, that sort of games zine that you've always wanted, harkening back to the fanzines that I would read when I was younger?
Yeah.
And I was like, actually, yeah, I've had this idea that a lot of the Slay Industries, like fanzines, focused very much on adding new character classes, new equipment, new kit. Like, I really loved the bits where it was like the fiction, someone was writing some in-world fiction, or someone was talking about why they like this quite obscure in some ways setting at the time that had been out of print on and off for a long time. Like Hogshead had picked it up, and then it went, like, it was indie, and then it was sort of taken in-house as part of Wizards of the Coast before they were with Hasbro, and then it was like passed over to Hogshead, but then things sort of would appear and disappear. It would sort of like it would disappear for long stretches, and I was like,
Yeah.
why are people still really so keen to be playing it and to still be creating with it within the sort of setting? And so I got a fanzine made of people who had that passion for the setting, writing articles and writing love letters and writing short fiction, and I handmade it and put it together and sent it out. And then that was so popular, it had so many sort of submissions. I did a second one, and I'd been doing club zines again for the local games club. And then I had this backlog of games that I designed and some new ones that I was putting together. And so I had a bit of inspiration and started putting them out.
Yeah, just before we go on to some of the other things that you've done in your design, Slay Industries is a really, really interesting case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I got the first edition of that when it came out, and I got it purely on the back of the cover. Off the back of the cover, just seeing the cover on the shelf, probably in the Virgin store on White Frigate in Hull.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I remember taking it home, and I love the art, I love the aesthetic, and I remember taking it home, reading it, and thinking, I really kind of like the idea of this, but I have no idea how I would run it. So it went on the shelf, and then it went during the Great Purge, and I didn't even hear about Slay Industries again, and probably till about, was it 2 or 3 years ago it was rebooted again?
Yeah, so they did a new edition.
But it was very, very British and very particularly Scottish as well, in sense of tone and nihilism and everything. Not that I'm suggesting everybody in Scotland is nihilistic, but there's a certain sense. We spend a lot of time in Scotland. We holiday there frequently, and there's I think if you talk about, I'm a Yorkshireman, but if you talk about the cheerful nihilism that perhaps people in the British Isles have, I think that their stat in Scotland is just a little bit higher than everybody else's. How would you describe Slay Industries to someone who's never heard of it?
Oh, I would describe it as a Thatcherite hellhole. where you're playing quite basically people who've grown up in this hellhole who have ended up through bad reasons working for the single evil corporation that now runs as government and every shop, and as reality itself is breaking around about you, you're trying to patch things together, and like you say, it's got a bit of friendly nihilism to it. It's got humor. It's got some social critique, and it's also very, I think, Splatterhouse noir. It's got like this sort of like glossy noirness to it, and also this sort of like horror Splatterhouse element to it, and also a lot of weird stuff going on depending on how you want to take it.
Yeah. The annoying thing is, you just give that recap now. If that was a game that was being kickstarted now, I'd be all over it like a rash. But I think at age 19 or whatever I was at the time when it came out, it just wasn't for me at that time. So from doing these zines, you've moved on to you must have produced 3 or 4 standalone games now, right?
Let me think.
Be seeing you, The Connection Machine, Loathe Thy Dread Empire, Solstice.
Mum Chums. Which has got a kitchen sink drama about caring for kids, and going on to make another one. I'm going to keep going. Nobody can stop me.
Of course. Well, before we get onto your new Kickstarter, which is just about to launch, you've also been working as a designer for hire on things like the relaunched Air State, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very, very lucky to be asked by John Hodgson over at Handiwork Games to do a little bit of writing for A State, which is another sort of like, we're talking about Scottish roleplay games with science fiction cities. Those are the two. There's Mort from the World of Progress in Slay Industries, and there's the city in A State, and they're both places I've lived in my imagination. So.
Air State's another one. I picked that up when it first came out.
Yeah.
didn't get it. couldn't get my head. Enjoyed the book. Enjoyed the setting information. Couldn't quite get my head around what I was supposed to do with it. But once again, that was probably 20 plus years ago, and I really probably need to take a look at the new version. But what's next for you? Kickstarter. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was going to say, definitely take a look at the new version. The older version, I think Malcolm Craig, who sort of like behind it, would be the first to say the earlier version was a little bit more naive in some ways, or a little bit more. It wasn't as well developed. It still had a little bit of that sort of almost too tropey cyberpunkness to it. It had a lot of individuality, but the newer edition is just, it is beautiful. It's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful game, and very, very weird fiction, Dickensian. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell us about your Kickstarter that's about to launch.
Oh yeah. So I'm moving on to an occult action thriller type game called The Thunder Perfect Mind. So effectively, it's been inspired by several different things. There's actually a almost 2,000-year-old poem called The Thunder Perfect Mind, which I read, and it talks in these sorts of ideas of duality and contradiction, and from these sorts of contrary positions of the poem's narrator, it's sort of meant to encourage you to think about outside the box a bit. And it kind of married with the idea of, I'd been toying with we were talking about like the 90s game boom and White Wolf, and they had their Vampire the Masquerade line. And part of that was this book, which ended up in my possession, called Kindred of the East. And this is a game that I really have huge problems with, but there was some core to it that I really loved. The problem was, it was just, if you looked up a definition of Orientalism in roleplay gaming, right underneath D&D's Oriental Adventures, you'd find Kindred of the East. It's just got all the yeah.
That's just happened to be just next to my left leg on the shelf. Yeah. And I think Land of Ninja, the RuneQuest 3rd edition.
Oh yeah.
Could also go in that camp.
Yeah. It's in that same sort of, and it's not. Yeah, it's marred by that, because the core idea, and this is something I've taken forward myself, is like you're playing characters who have found some sort of higher, like they've died. You're playing revenants. You've clawed your way back to life because you've got some sort of higher purpose, but also you've got some sort of tether to the world that's stopping you from being better than you can be. You've got like your past life is still, you've got nostalgia for it, or you're tied to it, or you've got unfinished business. There's all this sort of undead politics and occult mystery going on around about you, and it's all holding you in place. And so I was like, that's a great idea. And then I read this poem, The Thunder Perfect Mind, and it has these ideas of dualism and sort of, it ties in with sort of Moorcock's law and chaos kind of dualist ideas that if you go too heavily into one camp, then it's kind of an unmitigated chaos or crushing law has very much a similar effect. Whereas what you're looking for is sort of like a collective freedom that comes from a sort of joy in both, and an understanding in both. And so all these sorts of ideas bouncing about in my head became this sort of occult action thriller with I was like, what did I actually want from Kindred of the East? I was like, I wanted breakneck action. I wanted interpersonal drama. I want occult investigation. And I'm like, okay, so I started building the game on that. And this comes back to the game we played, Houses of the Blooded. Yeah, so we played that on the basis of, we were talking about what would a more narrative-focused Moorcockian game look like, and I think I said, like this. This is the game I would pick for that at the moment. And we had a playthrough of it, and just as a one-shot, it was a lot of fun. And I kind of have borrowed ideas from that game of sort of you sort of you're gathering up these fistfuls of dice. You put some aside to wager on the outcome, and then you roll the rest, and then those wagers add in as narrative details later down the line. So, yeah, I would say this game's sort of perfect if you like those three sort of aspects that I mentioned: the sort of breakneck action, the cult investigation, the interpersonal drama. That's what I've sort of aimed it really firmly on. And yeah, I kind of feel like fans of the old White Wolf stuff will dig it. Fans of more sort of modern narrative stuff will dig it. So yeah.
That sounds really fascinating, because I mean, me and Loss really enjoyed that Houses of the Blooded game that you invited us to. It was excellent. I did pick up the rule book. I can't remember whether I managed to get hold of the PDF and get one printed up, or whether I actually, because the actual copy of Houses of the Blooded was, well, it was like rocking horse shit. It was very, very hard to get hold of. But I did that with a couple of ones, but I can't remember whether there was that on it. But I've still got it. It's funny enough, it's not too far from my bed. Sometimes you just pick... I will pick something up and I'll just have a read through just out of interest, because I think like most gamers, we like to have games and we like to play games, but also there's a little bit of us that just wants to sit and read games. And, so I think I've got a little pile of them next to my bed. There's a supplement for Sorcerer. I got these supplements for Sorcerers PDFs because you couldn't get them in print, and I got them printed up, and I can't find my Sorcerer book, which is really annoying. I think I might have sold it years ago on eBay, but I've got I think it's Sorcerer and Sword, and some others like mashed up. So, and I just like to pick them up and read through them. And I did the same with White Hack and a few others. Yeah, just they all have really like interesting, fascinating ideas in them. But I don't get to game often enough to actually get these things to the table. So I just love I'm probably more collector than gamer when it comes to games these days. But it's like I really loved Solstice. I've never got around to running it, but just to pick it up, read it, and love the ideas in there, absolutely fantastic. So I'll definitely be back in your Kickstarter. When does it go live?
1st of February.
Right, okay. So we are now recording on the 25th of January. I will make sure I get this out over the next few days. The beauty of doing an interview with somebody is it's a billion times easier to edit and put out than something that involves me reading from a Moorcock book and fucking up my reading 47 times and having to constantly go through it and edit it. So I'll get this out in the next few days. How long's the Kickstarter going to be out for? Is there a standard time on Kickstarters?
It's changed in the last few years. I think as the world has changed around us, the whole idea of running, like, unless you're doing some sort of big hardback book, I think it's short and sweet is the way to go. I think I'll run it for about 10 days.
Right.
That's what I've put down, and that's probably what I'm going to do, because I find that there's a sort of big boost at the start, and then there's a little bump at the end. In the mid part, you get a few people, but it just sort of hangs about. And I'm not doing this for a living, so I've got a different metric for what my success looks like, how I want to go forward with it. I'm in a lucky position, I guess, that I'm not looking to put bread on the table with the success of a Kickstarter. And so I can go about things a little more casually in some ways.
Well, good. We'll get this out anyway, and we'll let people know. I know I'm certainly of the type that will either back a Kickstarter from the first minute, or I will follow it and then do it in the last half hour when I think yes, because I've had I've had a moratorium on Kickstarters. I keep trying to give myself or force myself into a moratorium on Kickstarters, and I have been doing for years. But things still arrive in my letterbox that I completely forgot about that I backed on Kickstarter. So I've completely failed. But yeah, I very rarely back something in the middle of a campaign unless somebody just tells me about it and I've never heard of it. So have you got a notify on launch kind of?
I do. So
okay.
I'll give you the link.
We'll pop the link to that in the show notes. Yeah. So we first had this conversation, of course, about playing Houses of the Blooded, because I think you'd perhaps listened to one of the podcasts where we were grumbling about Moorcock and RPGs and how they don't quite get it right. So you suggested we play Houses of the Blooded.
Yeah,
and it was excellent. But of course, dial forward 3 or 4 years, and we've all abandoned the hellhole that is Twitter, and we're all now on Blue Sky. We had a similar kind of conversation, very briefly, on Blue Sky, and you mentioned, I think, with your tongue in your cheek, about how you'd love to go on a podcast and talk about your Multiverse RPG.
Oh, yeah.
So I leapt in like carrion. To say, well, you know what, fuck it, why don't you come and talk to me about these ideas, because I can talk endlessly about how I think that particularly actual official Moorcock IP role-playing games never ever get it right. And you know, many jokes about demon boots of jumping and everything else aside.
I've had some great times with Stormbringer / Elric, so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But it is what it is. It's like D100s and rolling percentages, and it doesn't. You can make a great story at the table with your friends, but it's not as Moorcockian as I'd imagine a game could be. And there's been other attempts, and I kind of like the different takes people have. I've seen Black Sword Hack. I've seen House of the Blooded, which the designer did a bunch of design videos where Moorcock was always being cited, and so I've about 15 years ago, as part of a game jam at the time, it was 15 years ago, just over. I started working on something that I adore, and this is maybe a controversial one. One of my favorite sort of multiverse works is the Michael Moorcock's Multiverse comic series. I adore it. I think I don't know what it is. It's lodged in my mind.
Yeah.
The sort of multi-story narrative, the sort of idea of the game of time being played.
Yeah.
The sort of everything about it, just the style of it. It isn't even like if you gave me that style of comic, it probably wouldn't hit so well with me. I don't know why, but it maybe just hit me at the right time in my life, or the story just. I keep going back to it. I keep rereading it, and I'd love. Sort of part of me was always like, I want to make that into a game.
Yeah.
And
well, that's a curious thing, isn't it? Because I do wonder if, having been brought up on things like 2000 AD, which is a comic which has 4 different stories in it, prepared you for the Moorcock's Multiverse, or prepared me for the Moorcock's Multiverse comic. I can imagine people who buy American comics where they've largely got one, apart from like the 70s, 80s Marvel comics, where you'd buy a Star Wars comic and it would have your Star Wars element, and then just because they needed to fill the page count and they didn't have enough product ready to go, they would slap in some Killraven or War of the Worlds adaptation or whatever it was. But I've always liked the anthology comic approach that 2000 AD had and Star-Lord had and all those things. So getting into that comic at the time, I remember getting it at the time, I got all 12 issues. I really need to pull my finger out and get the collected issue, the collected hardback, because it'll be. Although I think format-wise it's a little bit smaller, so maybe I won't. But the Walt Simonson art is fantastic. I love. I'm going to forget the name of the artist now. Who's the artist who did Button Man and did some Judge Anderson? Who does the Elric tale in it, where he's in Viking Europe?
Oh, I can't remember either, but the sort of that sort of imagery of it is
the black and white scratchy artwork. Absolutely fabulous. It's really, really irritated me that I can't remember his name. And of course, then you've got the metatemporal detective story.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, we should probably cover the Multiverse comic at some point on the podcast as an episode. So, you know, I might have you tagged for that, seeing as you've declared your love for it. Because a lot of Moorcock fans that I know, and myself included to some degree, when all the things like the Grey Fees and the Chaos Engineers were introduced, I started to struggle a little bit with that narrative, particularly in Blood. The split narrative between the Biloxi Fault and the Chaos Engineers and Captain Quelch and Co. I remember reading that in the 90s and struggling with it at the time, and that's something I've got on my reread list eventually, probably 2037 by the time I get around to that. But the Multiverse comic really managed to make some of that. It provided quite a lot of glue for that, didn't it? It made it make some level of sense.
And it pulled it all together in that sort of like you see the Chaos Engineers and how they're sort of operating and how they sort of come together to rescue one of their own, but also it starts to feed its way in, like thread into the other storylines, and they all start to pull slowly together. And it just comes to a really lovely conclusion, and I like the idea of them playing the game of time, but the game of time playing them. Like the characters appear both at the table and in the stories. It's got all the sort of wonder and weirdness that the multiverse could possibly offer.
I think as I've noticed, it's never really occurred to me, because I was thinking earlier on about what a truly Moorcockian game could be, because we've talked a lot on this podcast when we've done our RPG episodes about how certain games will pick up on certain trappings of Moorcockian stories and implement them. And some games will have the tone of his fantasy stories and kind of pursue the tone that they produce.
Absolutely.
But where I think that's where they fail, because they just introduce the more decorative element from Mike's stories, like the geographical settings or the magical trappings. And some people want to play in the Young Kingdoms, or they want to play a big long game. And to be fair, I do as well. My mate Steve Round has been. He's in Wales. He ran multiple big Stormbringer campaigns. He only runs games face to face. And as my old mate's Bridlington ship skipper dad would say, it makes my shit itch that I can't actually get in on those games. So I would love to play Stormbringer, but it's when you come back to that thing about how do you produce something that comes close to imitating or reproducing the sense of wonder and satisfaction you get from the best of Moorcock.
So my answer, and this is my answer, I think there'll be other answers out there, and I think people will take different takes, because there's all different ways you could approach this. But my take was to actually go to Mike talking about his writing. Okay, and I used to hang out on the Multiverse forum, and so there's always good back and forth there. And so I'd made a game 15 years ago just to try it out. It was rubbish, but it was I kept it. I kept the idea. I've kept the file of it on my hard drive, and I'd go back to it every few years. And the thing that clicked with me was I went back to the Lester Dent master formula for writing pulp.
Yep.
Okay, I went...
And Moorcock himself quoted the Lester Dent formula, didn't he, when he was talking about his own process,
I went back... Moorcock was talking about that. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. I've been privy to these conversations. Why am I... I'm looking at because I was thinking about Multiverse, the comic series. I was thinking about a game. I was thinking about a game where you're sort of almost outside. At first I was thinking you'd play the gods of law and chaos and and the sort of Grey Lords, and you'd be sort of meddling in the affairs of eternal champions. And that never worked out well. And then the Multiverse novel, this idea of playing a game with the narrative of these characters at a table. I'm like, this is perfect. And there's a few sort of conversation threads that bubbled in my head. One of them was like the sort of conversations about Lester Dent's sort of formula and how that applied. When you sort of look at that and you look at the first 1,500 words will have these things. The next thing, it's got the story beats laid out.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell you how they happen, or it's things like pile misery onto the protagonist. Okay, like
yeah,
like it doesn't say what that needs to be. It said introduce their nemesis here, but the nemesis gets away. That's all you need. Like these very, very loose story beats.
Yeah.
But when I would go back and then start reading, like even sort of like Dances at the End of Time, Elric, whatever. I'm sort of going back and I'm seeing, oh, I'm feeling a lot of these beats. So I'm feeling how the beats have been changed slightly.
Yeah.
But I can still see the sort of structure of it in a new light. So that was something that held in my mind. And the other thing was Multiverse has them playing cards. I was like, I want to include that. And then I remember Moorcock talking about how he didn't partake in tarot readings, like giving them.
Yeah.
And he didn't exactly believe in the tarot as a thing, but he said there were too many instances when he'd done a tarot reading and something monumental had happened after the fact, and it was a little too. It led to too many coincidences taking place, and he said it just wasn't good. So I can't remember exactly, and I don't think the forum's not there anymore, so I can't go back and check. I don't think it is. I checked a year or two ago, and it was missing. But,
yeah, I remember they restarted the forum.
Yeah.
And I tried to get on it, and they had a lot of technical problems with resetting your account, and I just gave up in the end. And I think it disappeared again.
Yeah.
But that whole idea of playing at a table, cards, there's something like, I don't know the first thing about tarot really, but there is something inherently intriguing about the tangible aspect of having, for want of a better expression, Moorcock's Multiverse tarot or whatever you want to call it, because there's something about the representation and the imagery. I mean, thinking back to the Amber RPG of all things, with all of the inhabitants or all of Corwin's brothers and sisters all represented by a tarot card, and I think that was they were drawn in the RPG. I really like the art, but the original versions of those actually were in a Roger Zelazny paperback called The World of Zelazny or something like that. But actually being able to introduce, because of course there's plenty of games that use cards now, isn't there?
Yeah.
But introducing that either abstractly or tangibly into a game to introduce those elements of, the Lords of Law, the Lords of Chaos, and all of the pawns. Sorry, mixing my metaphors here, that's chess. But you know what I'm talking about. to actually be able to use that and to have a group of players around a table with even just a normal deck of cards and incorporate that into some kind of narrative about, the battle between the stagnation of law and the excess of chaos, and how do you manage that continual correction through violence that the balance is,
So, So the game that it's still in development. This game, I might just keep it for myself. It'd be, I think, quite a feat to produce.
Yeah.
Even with the sort of the sort of serial numbers filed off but the idea of basically the core mechanic is playing hands of poker.
Nice.
And you're going around the table, and the sort of different raises or checks that you're making as you're going tie in with like less dense story beats.
Yeah.
And so you're creating the story, and then but along with that, it's modified by I've taken the major arcana from a tarot deck and then re-signified them for the sort of elements of Moorcock's multiverses. So so you've got like the black sword, which doesn't have to be a literal black sword, as we all know. The consort, the companion, the enemy, the eternal champion, etc. And so you've got in the center of the table, you've got the sort of core elements for any of the multiverse stories is pretty much an eternal champion, a sort of companion or consort, the enemy, the eternal struggle, and they're sort of laid out in a sort of in a sort of figure that shows you where the story is when we begin.
Yeah.
You deal those ones out, and everyone else gets 3 other Major Arcana tarot cards that are kind of like they'll have special effects on them to mess with the story or change up story elements. But you're also playing those story elements into the game. So, like when somebody in like the Multiverse series picks up a card and it's like the enemy and they throw it down into the middle, and then that's kind of the sort of cliffhanger / raising the stakes moments that I wanted to put into the game.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of gamers are a little bit intimidated by that idea of a player imposing changes to the narrative, which is quite a common element in modern narrative games, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think some players feel, myself included, feel a little bit intimidated by the idea that the game will put the pressure on me in some way to impose some kind of structure to any element of the narrative.
Yeah.
I think some people are much more comfortable with that, but there's something about that is absolutely inherent to Moorcock storytelling, because, and it's something, it's even a little bit meta, because we know full well that Moorcock himself will, and I have a little bit of a rant on it on an episode that is yet to be published about changing character names in certain books. So I won't go into that in detail. We'll save that one for that episode. But it's very Moorcock.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And not only is it very Moorcock that you would impose changes which change the dimensions and context of a scenario that the players are involved in, but also quite extreme changes. Like between books, Jerry Cornelius might change sex, he might change skin colour, he might... all of these things. So all of these things should be fair game or expected in a Moorcockian game narrative.
Yeah, and the idea that in most games you're playing a character in the narrative, whereas with this game I was aiming that you're playing a character who's affecting the narrative in a story.
Yeah.
So the sort of alibi that we're creating around it is a little more forgiving, because it feels like you may be crossing a boundary with somebody. If you and me are playing a game, and I tell you your character has this thing that you didn't imagine or didn't think of, that takes a bit more trust and negotiation, right? You have to trust that I've got some sort of good interest, or we're going in some sort of direction together. Whereas if we're like standing back from the narrative and saying this is a narrative that we are meddling in, knowingly, that becomes a better thing. Because then when I play something that the Eternal Champion has this like the shit rolls down sort of idea, it isn't I'm taking it out on you, your character. I'm taking it out on that character there that you maybe have an interest in taking a different direction.
Yeah.
And so it feels a little bit more like we're playing the game that we signed up for in a way that we enjoy, that gives us a little bit more distance. And you play multiple rounds, so the idea is you'd play a few different stories in an evening. You'd play out these narratives and have the different rounds start to maybe take prompts from one another.
Yeah.
So you could either play one a night, or you could play several in a night, or several over the course of a day, that sort of idea. And that takes idea from Multiverse of like, there's these different strands, different champions. You have each time you're playing, you have different cards that you can play. So, and each sort of full cycle is three full rounds of poker. And then,
you know what? I have there's probably a better expression for this, but I have something of a gamer boner about this entire idea. And at the moment, I'm just in the midst of thinking and planning around a Breakfast in the Ruins gaming day in Bradford at some point, possibly looking at June at the moment. See how many people are interested, see how many people game. But I am a semi-regular attendee, the Grognard Files, Grog Meet. Excuse me. And what they've done over the years from time to time is on the Friday they will have a big sort of meta game that crosses multiple tables, which is all aimed around the same thing. And I think doing something like this with a bunch of gamers who are into Moorcock and effective, whether it's playtesting or doing some kind of organised play around this kind of thing with a few different tables to see what all the different experiences are like, would be absolutely tremendous.
I would be very, very, very interested in that.
Well, at the moment, the grog meat, not the grog meat, sorry, we're calling it Rolling in the Ruins because it's a lyric from Dude's Dream anyway on New World's Fair, so it fits. It's only going to be AM and PM sessions. We don't know how many tables there's going to be. There might be one table, 2 tables, 3 tables, whatever. There's going to be a few people coming to Bradford to get together, play some games, have a few drinks, maybe go for a curry or whatever we want to do. Right. And then, if everybody enjoys it, we'll do it again in 2027 and we'll see how it goes. But at the moment, it's just a conversation on the Discord with the patrons. Once I start to nail down some of the detail, I'll start to spread the word a little bit, but I'll definitely keep you in the loop if you're interested in coming along and playing some Moorcockian games one Saturday in June.
Yeah, if I can't make this year, then and it goes first 2027 as well. I'll make one of them somehow.
Yeah, it would be terrific to have you though.
Yeah.
So all this sounds absolutely fantastic. I have to make a confession. Earlier on, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, right, I was still in that mode of thinking, how do you improve upon demon boots of jumping? So one of the things I love about this podcast is the ability to have guests who are more advanced in the thinking than I am and who know what they're talking about when it comes to things like game design. So absolutely wonderful to hear your thoughts on how something like this could work.
We can definitely still have the demon boots of jumping if you want them.
Oh, I don't want demon boots of jumping. I really don't want demon boots of jumping.
But someone else might really want them and put them into the story, and that's going to be...
This is the problem, and that is absolutely fine. If somebody's going to play... If somebody gets a full house...
Yeah.
and they want a 2-man canoe and some demon boots of jumping, well, who am I to object? Yeah, who am I to object? All I want is I want some psychedelia. I want some terrific coloured loon pants. Yeah. Because I think this is another thing that these games get wrong. They all go for a certain mood, a certain atmosphere, a certain aesthetic consistency. They all miss out on trips to the haberdashery to spend 2 paragraphs deciding what clothes you're going to wear. Absolutely. That needs to happen in my Moorcockian game. I
honestly, the description of Elric riding with Samuril over the outside of Imrir, like his last moment of peace before everything. He has many last moments of peace, according to Moorcock, but his last moment of peace before, and he's wearing like a yellow, a sort of pale yellow shirt, like black and white checkers, like the descript, a cloak, like this is so vivid.
It's fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. What the very first Elric story that we talked about, it was me and Loz, we talked about the Dreaming City. And I think one of us said he's dressed like a Burke. The best thing about Elric in the Dreaming City is he's dressed like a Burke. I'll never forget because somebody sent me a comment on it saying, I'm on the subway I was on the subway in New York listening to it and people were looking at me funny because I was laughing out loud. But that is one of the biggest problems I've got with the representation of Elric in media. I love Gerald Brom as an artist, but his Elric isn't my Elric.
No.
My Elric is dressed like a Burke most of the time. My Hawkmoon and my Deverk, they're wearing outrageously hideous clothes. And this is what I want. Now, we could end up with 1 million Moorcock RPGs, depending on the direction that conversations went. Would I get the Moorcock's Multiverse RPG that involves people playing the game and influencing the grey fees and everything else? But also we may get the more ground-level games. Those games need to involve trips to the haberdashery. And I would replace all of the price lists that have clay vases and 2-man canoes with an extensive list of how much they would have to pay in Melanomonian Dragons for electric blue loon pants. That, for me, that's where I'd go. That's where I'd go with it.
Amazing.
Well, you know what? it's been wonderful talking to you. I love your idea for this Multiverse game. We will get the word out about your Kickstarter, and we'll keep you in the loop regarding any Moorcockian gaming opportunities. I might even do an online one at some point, because of course we've got lots of patrons in the USA, in Sweden, Lithuania, Israel. We've got them all over the bloody place. So not everybody can make it to Bradford to play a face-to-face game. So we may even do a virtual one at some point. But thank you so much for taking the time to spend an hour with us this afternoon and tell us about your gaming and your game design theories and everything else.
And thanks for having me on. It's been amazing. I look forward to hopefully a future Multiverse episode, even if I'm just listening to it.
Now, I'll tell you what, we will do a Multiverse comic episode, and we shall do it, if you're up for that.
Very.
Okay, well, this is a special Derry and Tom's. It's a meet the patrons kind of deal, I guess. Yeah, and I've got with me Randall Gatlin. Now, Randall, welcome to Derry and Tom's.
Oh, nice to be here.
We have been just communicating on and off for, well, you've been a patron of this podcast since August 2020, which is 5.5 years.
Wow.
Which is incredible, really, because we're only a little bit over 6 years old.
Yeah.
So it had occurred to me a short while ago that of the first dozen or so patrons that this podcast got, some of them have been on as co-hosts, so people like Simon Perrins and Dave Voxman. Some of them are people that are old mates of mine, like Loz and Taylor, who I see regularly face-to-face and I've known since I was a teenager. And a couple of the other people are just, very content to be patrons and quiet and peaceful and just be there and support the podcast. But it did occur to me that, perhaps we should be reaching out and actually making contact and saying, you know what, come into Derry and Tom's and let's talk Moorcock and find out how you got into all of this business, like we do with every new guest or co-host, just to have a drill down into your history with Moorcock. So, Randall, welcome to Derry and Tom's. It's a delight to have you here.
It's nice to be here.
Now, we've just been having some technical problems, haven't we? Which is sod's law. But for a split second, for a brief moment, I saw you, your T-shirt and your marvellous jacket, your battle vest. And you said that you've got, what have you got on the back of it?
My back patch is the cover of Space Ritual, the album from '73.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It took me a while to find that one.
Yeah. I can imagine a patch like that's not easy to find.
No, it's not. And it was expensive, and I had to wait 2 months to actually get it.
Oh, was it special made?
No, I think they had them in stock at somewhere maybe even out of the Ukraine. I can't remember. It was an odd shop I got it from.
Massive metal community in the Ukraine, isn't there? Huge metal community. Well, you know what? It's lovely to have you here. Now, I understand, because we've already had a little chat, because we've been battling technical gremlins, that you also have an afternoon beverage.
Oh, yes. Well, it's just a local brew. It's Sweetwater IPA. It's a brewery out of Atlanta. For some reason around here, IPAs are so popular. You go to the store and there's 50 different IPAs.
Yeah, I think it's just a modern beer trend thing.
Yeah.
I would guess that if you go into, we have numerous craft beer shops and little shops that specialise in various things and also have a big booze corner, because we're living in a golden age of beer in many ways.
That's true.
But I've got to say, 70% of the ones I see tend to be pales or IPAs. Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of IPAs for quite a while. I was playing bass in a band. They always had free beer, and it was always IPA, so I developed a taste for it,
Yeah. Well, when needs must.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got to say, back in the day, before IPA became very, very popular and trendy. See, we all say this, don't we? Yeah, I was into IPA back in the day originally, but IPA in the old days just meant a high strength pale ale, really.
Yes.
So give me a Sam Smith's IPA or something like that, I'm quite happy. I'll quite happily drink it. But this modern trend towards the really dry hopped ones, that like dry you out and desiccate you like you're an old biscuit. Not so keen on them.
I'm not so keen on the high alcohol content. Like around 5 to 6% is where I like my beer. Yeah.
That's a sweet spot for me. Although I must say I am a sucker for a session beer as well. So if I want to spend a day on it, which I'm not doing too much these days, to be honest, I would quite happily drink something slightly lower. So at the moment I'm finishing off, still in the business of finishing off Christmas booze stash. So I've got Kirkstall BYB, so Best Yorkshire Bitter. It says a name synonymous with brewing heritage, BYB is a modern take on an all-time classic. Pale and crystal malts combined with English hops to produce a balanced, easy-drinking session beer. You'll be sure to open a second one. Now, it says a session beer, but it's 4.5, which I think is probably a little bit high for a session bitter. But, you know what? As it's a Sunday evening and we're just taking it steady and chewing the fat, and I'm not intending to get arseholed, 4.5, fine. That's absolutely fine.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well,
Sorry,
I was saying it's interesting. Sometimes, you'll buy a beer because of the label. It's some great artwork. I'm going to try this. I remember going into the local store and seeing the Trooper beer. And I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. So I'm so excited to grab a 6-pack. I don't care for it. It's not that good.
I don't like Trooper either.
No.
Yeah, I remember seeing it for the first time in a pub. And funnily enough, Trooper, I should have realised, Trooper is made by a Manchester brewery called Robinson's.
Yes.
And I have a really, really poor relationship with Robinson's because of poor experiences in my youth. When I was in my late teens, a very good friend of mine, her stepbrothers were based in Manchester. And I went over for one of their birthdays. It was his 21st birthday. And I think I was 19. And of course, when you're 19, you're broad of trouser and thinking that you can cope with anything.
Yeah.
And I spent the afternoon in the pub drinking with his family. And they were hardcore Manchester drinkers. And after spending the afternoon in their local, which was a Robinson's pub, drinking the Robinson's Bitter, which wasn't off hand pump, wasn't cask, it was keg, on electric tap. Because, Randall, honestly, I'm not going to go into big detail about this, but just take it from me, there was a horrific period in pubs in England back in probably the late 80s, early 90s, where hand pumps disappeared from pubs for a while. And the breweries all replaced them with electric taps and kegs. So you were used to getting a beautiful pint of Bass Bitter hand drawn from a cask, and then all of a sudden it disappeared, and all you could get was electric tap Stones Bitter or something terrible like that. And it was during that period, and I spent the afternoon drinking this Robinson's Bitter, and it was a wee bit sour, but it's all there was. So I carried on drinking it. 6:30, I was in the toilet throwing up 7 pints of Robinson's Bitter, and I've never drunk it since. I've always hated Robinson's Brewery with a passion as a result of that. And then I saw Trooper beer, tried it, thought, I don't really like that. Saw it was Robinson's, I thought, ha, now I know why I don't like that beer. It's all Robinson's fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen that there is, you know what, we will get on to your experiences with Moorcock in a moment, but let's just stick with beer for a moment. Yeah. Have you seen that Megadeth have launched a line of beer?
Actually, my son was telling me about that. I haven't tried it, but I have seen the beer.
Yeah, I almost ordered some, but it was a little bit too pricey for me. And it's a bit gimmicky, isn't it? Bands.
It is. Beer. It really is. I wanted to try the Rush beer, and after trying the Trooper, I was like, I'm not doing signature beers anymore. I don't think it's.
Well, the weird thing is, Megadeth beer, I was really surprised by this. Megadeth partnered up with a brewery called Black Sheep Brewery about 30 miles north of me. In North Yorkshire. I thought, Megadeth and Black Sheep Brewery, that's a really, really weird combination. Because Black Sheep Brewery are basically known for Black Sheep Bitter and not a whole lot else.
Wow.
Cask Bitter. So there they are, teaming up with Megadeth to do a pale ale and an IPA, Rattlehead IPA.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so weird, but yeah, they do seem to team up with the strangest people, but Megadeth and Black Sheep Brewery? That is a strange one. I'm glad to get some now.
Maybe Mustaine's a fan of the beer, you know?
Maybe so, but yeah, Dave Mustaine with a pint of Black Sheep. But then, of course, you know, these bands, they tour all over the world, don't they? They'll try everything, they'll drink everything. So it's inevitable at some point an American Bay Area band or something like that is gonna rock up in the north of England and go, ooh, this pint of Black Sheep's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other one that I've ever had that I actually really rated was Slayer Rain in Blood Red Wine.
Oh, wow.
I got that probably 10, 12 years ago. I got a case of 6. I've still got one.
Wow.
Still got one on the wine rack, saving it for a special occasion. That was really, really good. Yeah, so there you go.
I try to keep a couple different beers that I collect, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to collect beers because sometimes you get a few down and you end up drinking the one you put aside to collect, you know.
For me, beer is there to be drunk.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like a while back I was like, oh, I found another can of that Alien Romulus cherry sour. I got a case of. I was like, oh, maybe. Fuck it, I drank it. I did the same with the 28 years later beers. I was like, oh, shall I? No, I'll drink it. I'll drink them. Beer's there to be drunk.
You're right.
Yeah. Anyway, now we've got beverage talk out of the way. Let's talk about you and your history with Moorcock and genre fiction, because you're in Cleveland, right?
Yes, Cleveland, Tennessee.
Cleveland, Tennessee.
Not Ohio. Most people, when I say Cleveland, people assume Ohio. I'm just outside of Chattanooga.
That is why I assumed that your time difference to me would have been a couple of hours more, because I just assumed Cleveland, Ohio, maybe subconsciously.
Yeah.
I'm probably putting too much praise on my own intellect there for saying that that's even possible. It was probably just a rough guess. So Cleveland, Tennessee. Eastern Seaboard?
Yes. Yep.
So what was growing up in Cleveland, Tennessee like for a fantasy sci-fi metalhead?
It was pretty lonely, to be honest. It was this is kind of getting ahead of myself, but it was kind of interesting once when I first met Dave Brock from Hawkwind. He was asking where I was from, and I was explaining it to him. And I was explaining to him just outside of Chattanooga, a small town. He was like, not much of a freak scene there, is there? And, you know, I was like, no, me and a couple buddies are about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was cool. Yeah. There's more now, but growing up here, you know, I had a small group of friends. We were into, you know, sci-fi, fantasy, AD&D, you know, so now there's a much bigger community of like-minded people. But you were kind of warriors back then. You know, it was just one of those, you were surrounded by, you're just surrounded by people that didn't quite understand where you were coming from. Yeah. And
so
plus,
is Tennessee like country music territory?
Yes, definitely. You have Nashville, which is, you know, seen as the home of
course,
country music. Yeah.
So how did you find your way into these things?
Well, from a young age, I've always been an avid reader. From a young age, my school library, I fell in love with science fiction. Jules Verne, H.G. Wells. I was always reading just any sci-fi I could get my hands on. Yeah. And honestly, it probably started with seeing something on television, Star Trek or something else that piqued my interest in the genre.
Yeah.
The way I discovered Moorcock, interestingly enough, was I had never read fantasy. I had a teacher in elementary school. It was my 5th or 6th grade year in elementary. And she was like, I've noticed you love reading science fiction. She brought me a copy and gave it to me, a copy of The Sword of Shannara.
You know what? Those people who pop up in your life.
I know. So I read it and I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I'd never read Tolkien at the time. I didn't realize just how unoriginal this book was, you know. But so I devoured those first 3 Shannara books, fell in love with them. I had a cousin. At the time who was a big influence on my, in my life. I was around 11, 12 years old. He was going to a local university, and we would just always hang out. He was the first person I ever role played with. Gamma World, Traveler, games like that.
Yeah.
But he didn't have a very high opinion of the Shannara stuff. And he kind of giving me a hard time about reading it. Yeah. And I noticed he was reading an Elric novel at the time.
Yeah.
So that stuck in my head. And I remember the next summer I joined the Science Fiction Book Club. I don't know if you remember the Science Fiction Book Club. You pay like, I don't know, a penny, 99 cents, and you get 10 free books.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
But the first 2 books I picked out were the Elric Saga, Volume 1 and 2, which contained the 7 core Elric novels.
Yeah.
And so when I started reading Elric...
So they're part of your 10 free books?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, yes. What a fucking bargain.
Yeah. And then I think that... yeah. And then I got, I think along with that, I got the Stainless Steel Rat books, some Arthur C. Clarke, some Asimov. But yeah, reading Moorcock for the first time, it's almost like, this is what I've been looking for. It fucking blew my mind. Yeah. And of course from there, once you get a taste for it, you start, back then without the internet, you start browsing stores, you start going to the local bookstore and, can you order this? Can you order this? So my favorite book of the core 7 Elric novels was Sailor on the Seas of Fate. And from that, obviously, it was easy to progress. Oh, wait, there's a Quorum book. There are Hawkmoon books. So that's how I branched out into all the Eternal Champions stuff. Interestingly enough, I really had no guidance on the order to read those. I remember, of course, Quorum, Hawkmoon, the Aracosa books. Oddly enough, at the local Walmart department store, I found my first Aracosa, The Dragon and the Sword, I believe. So I read those out of order. Luckily, I did end, by sheer luck, I think, on the Count Brass books. So Quest for Tanaloran, of course, closes out the cycle. And I was lucky enough to end that cycle perfectly without knowing that I should finish that last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're one of those folks that read the Elric sequence in narrative chronological order.
Yes.
Unlike me and my mates, all people had you just read whichever one you found in a second-hand bookshop.
Yes.
Or in my case, the first one I read was Stormbringer, because that's the one that I got off my granddad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, quick question. How jarring is it going from Elric of Melniboné to Fortress of the Pearl to... Sailor on the Seas of Fate? Because you'll know from listening to the podcast, Loz and I mused on this. It's like, how we never did this. We read all these Elric books, then we read Fortress of the Pearl when it came out, so we'd read everything.
Well, now, when I got these books, Fortress of the Pearl hadn't been published.
Oh,
so this was back in the early to mid 80s.
Right.
So I just had the first 7 that he had written. Now,
so no Fortress and no Revenge of the Rose.
Exactly. None of the Moonbeam Road stuff. Now, the last time reading those, there was the Elric collection was released recently, and I think 4 volumes.
Saga Press, they released 3 volumes and then released Citadel of Forgotten Myths.
Yes.
Which awkwardly doesn't take place after those 3.
Yes.
So you have to get creative on your shelf.
Actually,
quite annoyed, really.
Yeah, yeah. So the last time I read them, which I knew after reading Moorcock for years, that when I read them in the chronological order, I knew there would be it would be disjointed, his writing,
Yeah.
So the last time I read it, it really stood out, but I knew where the story was going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very different. Mike's writing has changed so much over the years.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would not recommend someone read them in that order to start with.
No, I always wondered what it would be like, but then I have talked to people who said they read them in that order, including Fortress of the Pearl. In fact, one guy who used to be a patron, nice guy, said that his first ever Elric book was Fortress of the Pearl, and he absolutely loved it. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit, really, because had I never discovered Elric and read Fortress of the Pearl first, I really don't know what I would have made of it.
Yeah.
It would have been quite a strange one.
I agree, because there's something with knowing Elric when you're reading Fortress of the Pearl. When he pulls Stormbringer out for the first time, you're like, oh, yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have had that history there if you hadn't read Elric before. Yeah.
So there you go. You're on your way with Moorcock, and you've blown genre fiction wide open, and you've got your head deeply down the rabbit hole. Now, when I found from running this podcast that people into Moorcock or discover Moorcock, there's like a Venn diagram that people occupy 1, 2, 3, or all parts of, and it generally tends to be Moorcock and genre fiction is one big circle. Hawkwind and Space Rock is another big circle.
Yes.
And RPGs are the third big circle. And there's a whole lot of us that sit squarely in the middle of that Venn diagram. And it appears that you do too.
Yes, I do. Definitely.
So living in the worldwide capital of country music, how did you find your way into things like Hawkwind?
Honestly, Hawkwind I discovered by relation to Moorcock. Because, reading bios and things like, oh, this guy was in a band called Hawkwind. I remember, I think the first Hawkwind album I picked up was the Xenon Codex on cassette tape.
And
I
don't think I'm aware of that one.
Yeah, there's no, of course, there's no Moorcock songs on it, but in my mind, there was a connection. Well, Moorcock was in this band. Yeah. And of course, Blue Oyster Cult. I realized there was a connection there. So, I jumped on that train too, but I became a huge Hawkwind fan. Yeah. Especially after I started experimenting a little more. As I got older, I realized, okay, now I understand why this music's so weird,
Yeah, maybe that's the fourth part of the Venn diagram that remains unmentioned. Yeah. And when it comes to the gaming side of things, did you ever, was AD&D your gateway drug with RPGs?
Honestly, my cousin we started playing RPGs. We were doing Gamma World and Traveler.
Yeah.
That was really the first RPGs I played. And then when I had gathered a small group of friends together, all Moorcock fans, all fantasy fans, we really started getting pretty deep into Dungeons and Dragons. Which, at the time, during the satanic panic here in the States, and living in what we call the Bible Belt, which is a heavily Protestant Christian influenced culture in this area. Luckily my mother never put any restrictions on the books I could read, the music I would listen to. I had complete freedom in that way. So I feel lucky,
Yeah, mothers are great, aren't they?
Well, they are.
As it happens, this little bit that we're recording here, this Meet the Patron bit, is going to be appended to the end of our latest episode on RPGs. Moorcock and
nice.
RPGs. So, did you ever play any of the licensed Moorcock RPGs?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I wish my Moorcock bookshelf was a little closer so I could look and help stir my memory some. But no, Stormbringer. Played Stormbringer a bit.
Yeah.
I've got a copy of the Hawkmoon role-playing game. We played it a bit, but more Stormbringer. I actually DM Storm. I'm not the best DM.
Yeah.
I've got a buddy that is a master DM, and it's because he's so off the cuff and he improvises so well. I get irritated when the players disrupt my story. I'm that kind of DM, and that doesn't work good. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doomed in that case.
You are doomed. Yes.
Players will never, ever, by and large, do what you want them to do.
You're right.
Yeah. Now, that Hawkmoon RPG, I've had that since back in the day, and I don't know. I think, my thoughts on the Stormbringer RPG are on record already. But we're going to do the Hawkmoon RPG as an episode at some point, I think. Probably do a two for do the Chaosium one and the Mongoose one. Yeah. Just so I can find out if anybody ever got the Mongoose one and it didn't fall apart.
Yes.
Because that was a horrifically poor quality binding.
Yeah, my Stormbringer is in pieces,
Is that the 3rd edition Games Workshop one?
I believe it is. Yes, I believe it is.
Yes, everybody's. Yep. Everybody's copy of 3rd edition Stormbringer by Games Workshop never survived even half a dozen handlings before completely falling to pieces.
It was something with the time period there, because I think the Warhammer books would do the same.
Yes, it was Games Workshop, and it was that particular period, because Games Workshop did the first Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay edition, they did Stormbringer 3rd edition, and the other one that fell apart as soon as you breathed on it was the Games Workshop edition of Call of Cthulhu, which had a lovely cover, but absolutely terrible quality binding. So there'll be lots and lots of people out there who have disintegrating copies of all three of those, and probably others that I've forgotten about as well.
Yeah, probably.
When Mongoose got the license and they did the Elric role-playing game, they also did a Mongoose, using their version of the RuneQuest system. They also did a Hawkmoon game, which had quite a few supplements by, I think, was it Gareth Hanrahan, that one? I think it might have been Gareth Hanrahan. And, terrible quality binding in pieces, in absolute pieces. Loz has got his copy, and it just disintegrated within about 3 or 4 openings. Absolutely appalling. But Mongoose had a really, really poor spell as well when it came to quality of books and binding.
Yes,
I don't know. I think you just have to get used to it, don't you? And love it. I mean, hell, my first edition copy of Twilight 2000 is hole punched and in a binder.
Yes.
With, covered in old yellowed sellotape.
Yep.
And I think there's probably something quite romantic and pleasant about those old well-thumbed... Well, they're not even well-thumbed, are they? Some of them. They fell apart in no time. But an old well-thumbed game book, which has got its scars, there's something quite romantic and enjoyable about that. So you still playing these days?
No, not in a while. My friend, who's the master dungeon master, every now and then we'll get together and we'll play a few sessions, but we never go through huge campaigns or anything. It's just, life happens.
Yes.
Yeah, and somehow you have less time than you ever did as you get older. That's so odd, but... Yeah,
it's a ball ache, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But it happens. So I've just got to quickly flash you a look at my Rebound Stormbringer.
Oh, nice.
Which I found a place in Leeds. It even says Breakfast in the Ruins edition on it.
Very nice.
I found a place in Leeds that binds dissertations for students and engineering manuals. So I took my disintegrated copy of Stormbringer along and got them to bind it in faux leather with a reading ribbon.
That is so nice.
Proper stitched binding, and with the first Stormbringer companion included at the end as well. So
wow, that is.
It cost me, I think, £45 to get it done, but this Stormbringer now will last forever and is robust enough to beat someone to death.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah. And I've used that a few times now, and it's actually not disintegrated, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. So you've been a patron of this podcast, as I said, for 5.5 years. How did you come across the podcast?
I honestly don't remember.
The magic of algorithms.
Probably. Yes, I do. I use Spotify.
Yeah.
which, I love Spotify. I love streaming music, but it's really hurt my album collection.
Mm.
There's, I think the last 3 Iron Maiden albums, the last 2 Hawkwind albums, I never actually bought a physical copy. And that's, it kind of annoys me. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure I found your podcast on Spotify somehow.
Right. Yeah.
Could have been just searching Moorcock.
Yeah.
Just to see what popped up. Yeah.
I'm always curious to know how people found us, because it's still, even after doing this for over 6 years, it's still, blows me away and makes me really, really happy that I'm talking to a guy in Tennessee who listens to the podcast. and one of the first...
you're actually the reason I joined Patreon.
Right, okay.
I mean, I was like, hey, I got to get these guys some, help them out a little here. And that's, yeah.
Well, you know what? It's absolutely fantastic that you did, and we're really, really grateful. And I can still remember to this day getting a message off Dave Voxman, who said that he was driving down the interstate towards San Francisco or San Diego, wherever he was in California, listening to such and such a podcast and laughing out loud. And so I just had this image in my head of somebody driving roof down up an interstate in California, listening to us, and it was like, oh wow, this is really wild and really quite humbling. So
yes.
You know what a great thing that you found us, and even better that you saw fit to support us and help us keep this going. We're so grateful.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I understand. I love how you guys poke fun of Mike's writing somewhat sometimes. It's like, this is, I think when you guys were reading The Ice Schooner and how I'm very interested. I love going back and listening because I haven't read a lot of these books in 30 years, if not longer. And I love going back and listening to you reading through them and discussing these books. And it brings back the memories of the books. And I didn't realize that with subsequent editions, how things are changed.
Holy shit.
Things that are
for Warlord of the Air Part 2.
Oh, wow.
I have some thoughts on that.
Wow.
I have some real fucking thoughts on Moorcock's self-editing and revisionism. Oh, blimey.
So, I spent some time with Mike and Linda back in the early 90s. It was interesting. Like I said, when I started, by the time I got in high school, I had a group of friends. We were all Moorcock fans. I had a friend that had moved up from Atlanta to go to school here, and he saw that I was reading Moorcock. He was like, "Oh, I know that guy." And me and my buddies were like, "This guy's so full of shit." We were joking about, we need to take him out behind the school and just beat the shit out of him. He's just making stuff up. And we ended up going to a Rush concert in Atlanta, and he went along with us. Wow. And his friend, Paul, was there. We met him. Paul was the president of the Nomads, the Time Stream book, or the fan club.
Oh, no way. Incredible.
And so, no kidding. This guy did know Moorcock.
Yeah. And
so, I got to hang out with Mike and Linda quite a few times there. It was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
What an incredibly small world.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
And Mike is such people say, don't meet your heroes. That wasn't the case with Mike. He was very, looking back, I was some teenage kid. And when we would talk, he gave me the respect and attention that he would anyone, he was just such a gracious, soft-spoken, and loving person. Linda was great too.
Yeah, I think it's a really gratifying thing. I interviewed him for episode 100, and you're right, people often say don't meet your heroes, but it's a really gratifying thing to, after 99 episodes of praising somebody, and okay, occasionally poking fun
Yeah.
at certain
Yes.
elements, that you finally get to meet the guy, and he's just a fucking top bloke.
Yes. Yeah. And he
Absolute top
appreciates
bloke.
his fans. He definitely appreciates his fans.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think that's a really, really good note to leave it on. Moorcock is a fucking top geezer. And thanks, Randall, for taking the time to drop in and tell us about your experiences with getting into Moorcock and meeting Moorcock and everything else around it. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thanks for the invite, and it's nice being here.
Many thanks to Tanya for coming by to talk about their game design work and ideas on gamifying the Michael Moorcock's Multiverse comic. Naturally, 30 seconds after we finished recording, I remembered the name of artist, John Ridgway. Sod's law. Tanya will be back, I hope, to look in more detail at that comic. You can find their games in e-form on the Rich.io page, and I'll link to that in the show notes. And the Kickstarter for the Thunder Perfect Mind kicks off on the 1st of February 2026, and I'll link to that too. And thanks to Randall as well. It was fascinating to hear about the experiences of a metalhead Moorcock reader deep in the heart of Tennessee. And also, that Moorcock anecdote. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that at some point in the future. But in the meantime, thanks as ever to our patrons. First, those without tier, Anthony Paconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster and Sebastian Wheatbix. And to our Chaos Engineers, Ed von Stort, Andrew Clark, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave F., Dave Griffiths, Dave Oxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner-Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Rex Ossius Nusquam, Roger McCarthy, Scott Butler, Simon Perrins and Steve Braun. And of course, thanks to our crafty Jugaderos, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Alexander Harris, Kathy Rhubarb, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, James Connell, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Lone Hugo, Loz, Mark Buckley, Mark Hewlett, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Nick Hopkinson, Arthur Ziv, Sean Twist, Toby White and Taylor Lavery. And eternal thanks to our patron demons, Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andy Darby, Brian Henderson, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Janie Stim, Jason Vogel, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hjarper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Liam Jones, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, of course, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tone Malazzo, the OG patron, Norman Beresford. I'm coming to you next, Norman. And last, but never least, Robert McMillan. Okay, enough from me. You can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle at Breakfast Ruins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The web page is breakfastintheruins.com. We have our Patreon page too. There are a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, wherever you are in the world, whatever is going on your turf, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.